thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to assume that most of you know who I am. I'm Liz Richardson, Council's General Manager. Can I start by firstly acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Darug people, and show our respect for elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal people with us this evening. At our last meeting a little while back now, I undertook that we would come back to the community at a point before Christmas to update you on the project and sort of firm up where we're heading out there at Greens Road. A lot's happened since we last met, and we've been keeping you up to date through our weekly updates that you will all have been receiving. But tonight really gives us and gives Council the opportunity to present to you the final scope of works, what we expect that program is going to look like, and just continue to answer any questions that you might have of us. Please note we're recording tonight's meeting. So the recording of tonight's meeting will be made available on our YouTube page on Monday, and we'll make sure that we send a link out for those members of the community that couldn't join us this evening. Now, can I firstly, there's a number of staff and consultants on the meeting tonight. So firstly, I want to make sure if Will is here. So perhaps one of the unfamiliar faces is Council's Director of Infrastructure Services, and I'm just not sure. Will, I can't see people's faces, but perhaps he hasn't joined us on the call yet. And then along with some more familiar faces, Chris Arnott, who's going to be doing a little presentation and a bit of an update on the project, Council's Manager Design and Mapping. We've also got Richard Vaby, who some of you will know, Steve Burns, and a couple of our community development staff, Liz Murphy, Joe McWilliams, and others. We've also got, so what we're going to do is I'm going to hand over to Chris in a moment, and he's going to start us off with an update on the current works, and he'll then hand over to representatives of Public Works who are going to manage this project on Council's behalf. And we're going to be hearing from them about the construction deliverables, timelines and the like. And then Will's going to talk to some other issues that have been raised by members of the community over recent weeks. So at that point, we're going to open up to questions and you know, we'll sort of manage that process through. We are in a strange little period in local government that happens every 4 years, in between an election and the declaration of the polls, where we don't actually have an elected council in place. So there may be some, have been some otherwise familiar faces that you might have expected to be with us that aren't here due to that particular fact. So just bear that in mind. Next slide, Chris. As with the last two meetings,
Sorry, Liz, I've just got a slight technical issue here. I've just gone, my computer's
That's
just
okay, I'll just keep talking. Just to remind you a couple of the house rules of the meeting. So if I can just request that you keep yourself on mute while the presenters are talking. We'll attempt to take all questions at the end, preferably. And when we do take questions and answers, if you could use the raise hand function, that allows me to sort of manage the meeting much more effectively, and just please remain respectful during the meeting. So that is all I request of you, and I'm now going to hand over to you, Chris, to take it away.
Thanks for that. Sorry about that technical issue. We just had a storm here and my computer froze. So welcome everyone. It's nice to see you all joining us again since we had our last catch up on Greens Road. So today is just about an update, as Liz indicated, to take you through the completion of our permanent design and also the timelines we're looking at in relation to the construction phase of these works. So just as an overview, what I'll just take you through is give you a bit of an update on what we've done at Site 2 to date, the presentations from PSM and Public Works, outlining the final design and the construction timelines respectively, and we'll just sort of summarize and look at some of the next steps. So just as a bit of background and context, we've got the two sections of Greens Road that have been damaged. So at the bottom of that image is site 1. We're showing you now the lengths of works that we will be actually undertaking as far as the permanent works go. And site 1 is currently opened and operating with a 5-ton limit. So site 2, the extent of works we'll be needing to do is about 355 metres. That is also now opened and operating with a 5-ton limit. We do have the rain closure trigger, as you'd probably be all aware of. And just with the remediation works, pardon me, just to sort of summarise on that since we last met. So since the 19th of October, it's been open with a 3-ton limit during daylight hours. We've had that trigger with the rain events, and we've just recently had that change from 10 mil to 20 mil over 24 hours. So that's certainly a positive move for us. We've been able to increase the operating tonnage to 5 tonne as well since the 18th of November. And since the 1st of December, we've had 24-hour operation. And so some of these changes that we've been undertaking with the operating conditions have been based on constant monitoring. So the site's monitored every day. At some points, if it's raining every hour, we're looking at the whole site. We're also reviewing some of the reduction turnaround times for inspections and when we can reopen, especially after rain events. And I guess all of this work is really about continual improvement in how we're undertaking these measures at site 2. So with the permanent design, we've got Pell Sullivan Mainick, PSM, who've presented to you before. They've done the remediation work, designs, and what I'll do now is I'll hand over to Gareth, who'll take us through some of the details in the actual designs that they've done to date.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome, everybody. I think I've met quite a few of you virtually online now, so which is good. So I'm not going to speak for too long. Just going to give you an update of where we're at. So as Chris has mentioned, there's been quite a lot of advances that we've made along the way. There's still more to go. I know we're still working hard to keep on reviewing where we're at. The monitoring has been very helpful for us to know where things have changed and where they haven't changed. And so that, for example, that 20 mil increase in the rainfall trigger that we updated is based on that monitoring. It's based on seeing what happens when it rains. And for example, we had a small slip not that long ago, but we were able to look at what the event was that caused that and work around coming up with an improved trigger, as that's obviously that's where we want to be. We want to get this road back into shape. So on the design side, we've now finished our design, ready to go to tender. There's 50 drawings. So there's been a lot of work put in, not so much by me, but others in my team, which is Greg Fazone is online, Jeremy Toe, who's also been assisting, doing a lot of the review work. So I'm just going to take you through 5 of those drawings to give you a bit of a flavour for where things are at. This is the Site 1 overview. I think you can all see that. Hopefully it's sharing okay. And the Site 1 overview just tells us where we're going to be doing excavation on the site. That's some of the existing cracking that we've seen there, what the road alignment's going to be, different areas of how we're impacting the different properties and making sure we're keeping well clear of those, etc. And so that gives you a bit of an overview of where that alignment's going to be. And we've got the locations ready for the contractor to work with to put that alignment to actually construct the road in place. This is the Site 2 alignment, so very similar to Site 1 in terms of what you might see in the layout, where we need to cut into the slope and secure the slope, where we don't. Other things such as where the road, where the edge of the main wall that we're building is going to be, and other little bits and pieces. There are other drawings that show more details around drainage and other sort of features that are going to be part of that road, but just those two drawings give you an overview of what the sort of changes are going to be and the extent of that. If I go into a sequence, which I think was very similar to what we had last time, what we need to do to implement this design is to cut into the existing slope. So given that we have a road down here, that's the only access we have to the site, we have limits as to how much load we can put on this road, which means we have a limit to how high we can reach to be able to cut the slope. And that's factored into the design. We cut the slope down to get to good rock. As we go down, there are doing what's called soil nails, which go into the slope, like these green lines here. And they are grouted in and under specification. Once we get down to the road level, then the excavation continues below that. And this is the area where we're going to create a space where we're going to build an engineered structure, which is going to be the foundation of the road. So once we finish our excavation, we then build up this wall, which is a special, these are very large, heavy blocks. I think they're 400 by 400 by a meter or so. Greg can correct me, but they're not like your average retaining wall blocks. They're much more substantial than that. And behind these blocks goes purpose selected earth and reinforcing that goes behind there as well. And that gets built back up to our road. So we end up with quite a steep face, which is then protected from things like floods. There's drainage inside the road with various places where there needs to be pipe work to divert rainfall and those sort of issues. That gives you an idea about what the section, what it looks like in section along the road. And then we also have here, I've got to show you, is just a close-up of some of the detail that's gone through in terms of what that drain looks like, the reinforcement of that drain, the different type of drainage that we need to put inside this slope to make sure that slope remains nice and stable, the drainage that's inside the road itself. And this is accompanied by additional sheets of specification of these different elements and what type of blocks can be used, what specifications they need to meet, the backfill requirements, the reinforced earth requirements, other reinforcing in the drain and pipework, etc. So that's all part of this design. To give you something a little bit more, perhaps a little bit easier to view if you're not so familiar with sections. So we'll look at a sort of perspective view of what this looks like. So here we've excavated down to get to our starting point, which is it depends on where the rock levels are because they vary across. So sometimes we have to excavate relatively deep into the existing road, but still above the water line. So all of this design factors in where the typical water level is because we have to be able to work with the typical conditions that we have adjacent to us in the river. And sometimes we don't need to excavate as far because there's good rock, not as deep. Once we get down to that founding level, there's a concrete strip which goes down as a base place to start our block work. The block work comes in the first line shown here. There's reinforcing strips that are actually threaded through the block work and back around the compacted material. So once the first strip goes through, the first part of the strip, there's compacted material that goes behind that, which is designed to be strong, but also free draining and deal with the environment that it's been placed in. Those strips get folded back over the top. And then the whole process is repeated with another line of these large, very large retaining block structures. These blocks interlock into each other and they're reinforced back through the earth as well. So it ends up being a very stiff and strong structure. So that was really just all I wanted to go through with you. You've seen parts of this. It's really a matter of detailing all of this, doing all the design checks. That's really what we've been doing in the last while to make sure it can go out and be built, and it will be able to to perform its function, giving us the design loads we need where we can go for a standard loading for according to Austroads loading guides. It can sustain the water scour and other features to do with the river. And it can be built in a place where we have very steep slopes and boulders that we could dislodge, etc. And I just included this diagram as well. I showed to people some time ago, just emphasizing what we're dealing with. So I know there's still some comment around about why can't we just excavate further into the slope? And the reason is for every meter that we go in, we go up essentially 2 meters. So if we need to move away from this road and go 7 meters into the slope, we're talking upwards of 15, 20 meters that we have to then access. And we somehow need to be able to get up there, cut the slope, put in our saw nails. So we've really had to balance up. Yes, we'd love to be able to do that, but we have practicalities which limit our ability to cut into this slope. So we're doing two things at once, giving us some room where we can, but also rebuilding this environment here with a much more stringent and properly engineered structure. That's all I really wanted to go through with you so far.
Thanks for that, Gareth.
Thanks, Gareth. Do you want to stop sharing your screen, Gareth? We'll pass back to Chris.
Thanks for that, Gareth. Still having technical issues. Sorry about that, everyone. So we're moving right along. So just with the permanent works and delivering the permanent works, we've engaged Public Works Authority, who will take us through some of the timelines they've worked out in delivering what's now being designed by PSM. So I'll hand over to Peter Hogan to present on that.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to say I'm very pleased to be here tonight talking to the community about this project. My name is Peter Hogan. I'm the Director of Capital Projects with Public Works Advisory. We are a government agency that specialises in delivering government projects. We do a lot of work with government agencies and with local councils around New South Wales. Next slide, please, Chris. And I should also say before I get into this, I've assembled a team of two experienced project managers, James Alifai and Joseph Nassif. They are both qualified civil engineers who have specialised in the project management of civil construction projects. So this is just outlining the project milestones we're up to at the moment. One of the processes that we're doing is to seek planning approval. And we do this through what's known as a review of environmental factors, an REF. We're procuring the REF, and that should be finalised in Feb 22. For the Greens Road construction tender, the draft copies of the tender documents have been completed, and we are reviewing them currently with council and internally. The anticipated date for calling tenders is next week, Tuesday, the 14th of December. We will have a 6-week tender period, which will span across the Christmas shutdown. The anticipated tender closing date will be the 25th of January next year. We estimate that it will take approximately 4 weeks to award the contract. And this is because once tenders close, being in government, we have to follow very strict procurement and probity guidelines. We will undertake a detailed tender evaluation. There may be required negotiation of any tender qualifications and issues. Then we prepare a tender evaluation report, which we have reviewed internally in Public Works Advisory by our expert procurement panel. And we also then have to submit our recommendations to Hawkesbury City Council for their review and approval. This will all take around 4 weeks after the close of tenders. That means that we're going to be planning to award the construction contract in the second half of Feb. Now, in terms of the construction phase, this hasn't been locked in yet, but the current thinking of council is that construction will commence at Site 2 and will start in February and finish in June or July, and that some dependency around weather and issues that may be encountered on site. Following completion of Site 2, construction will then start at Site 1 in June or July and finish in around November 2022. Next slide, please. Oh, back with you, Chris.
That's okay. It's just
Okay, so look, council and public works are very aware of the wishes of the community around making this construction process as short as possible, and nobody wants to be putting the community to any longer period of inconvenience than is possible. As Gareth talked earlier, we have looked at ways that we could possibly, suggestions that we could maybe increase the width during the period of construction to allow cars through. Well, that has been assessed as just being unsafe and basically not a practical option. So what we are doing about this is that we're going to be looking at other ways to reduce the delivery time. At the moment, we're thinking that it's going to be in the order of about 34 weeks from start to finish, about 16 weeks in each section. Now, we're also looking at the possibility of extending working hours on the site and working days. So what we're talking about there is maybe having extending working for 6 days a week and possibly from, say, 7 in the morning until, say, 10 p.m. at night. But to make this possible, it would follow consultation that Hawkesbury City Council would have to have with the community yourselves, and may include if there are residents on the other side of the river who will be affected by the works. So that's this is an avenue that Hawkesbury City Council are following up on at the moment. Now, tenderers will be required to submit a detailed construction program with their tender to undertake the works during what are the normal standard working hours, which are Monday to Friday, 7 to 6 p.m. and Saturdays, 8 to 1 p.m. We were also, in the tender process, asked tenderers to consider alternative construction programs with shorter delivery timeframes than an end in November completion. So by this, I mean that we think it's going to take us about 16 weeks and 16 weeks and 2 weeks for the builders to get established on site at the beginning. But we are requesting through the tender box that they consider if they have any commercial suggestions on how we can do this faster. And that will be part of the consideration when we assess the tenders. We're also asking tenderers to provide us more information around the sequencing of the works. Final decision on the sequencing of the works, and by that I mean, are we going to be starting at Site 2 followed by Site 1, or alternatively starting Site 1 and then finishing with Site 2? A decision on the sequencing will be made by Hawkesbury City Council following the final tender negotiations. Next slide, please, Chris. Next.
okay. Sorry, Peter, it's just doesn't want to play at the moment. Apologies, everyone, once again.
The last slide that Chris is looking for is just a a graphic representation of the program that we've been describing.
There it is.
And it's just showing, as we've discussed tonight, we're getting the REF processed. We're looking at a tendering period and up to award from mid-December to mid-Feb. We are looking at a construction period that will possibly extend from the end of February up to November. We haven't decided yet on the order of the works, and we are hoping that they will take approximately 16 weeks for each section. And given the likelihood for some wet weather that may slow down the works and other things that may be encountered once they start digging into the side of the embankment, you know, it could slip a little bit one way or the other. And finally, we will know and be able to report back to you once we have completed the tender and have had detailed negotiations with the preferred, who will be the preferred tenderer who will win the contract, about the timeframes involved and what they can do to speed this process up. That's all I have to present for you tonight. Happy to answer any questions later on in the evening. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Peter. So just following on that and just talking on that sequencing. So at this stage and from previous discussions we've had with the other meetings we've had, the current way of thinking is we're looking at site 2 where we're undertaking the permanent works first. So just in a summary way, site 2 will be closed when those works are being undertaken, and during that period of time site 1 will remain open during the works. And once we've completed site 2, we will then be able to commence site 1, at which time the site 1 will be closed for that duration, as Peter indicated, as we're looking in the tender, and site 2 will be open to traffic. So this is the current way of thinking. I know we've had many discussions on that sequencing, but we are seeking from the tenderers on timelines and how things can work on that, and we can certainly get back to you on that. So I'll just hand over to Will Barton, who's going to take you through some of the other issues in relation to the project.
Good evening, everyone, and my apologies for being a few minutes late. So as Chris mentioned, my name is Will. I'm the new Director of Infrastructure Services. This is my 4th week, and day one I had the privilege of going out with Richard to inspect both sites on Greens Road, and in subsequent meetings with the community, one of the things that has been raised a few times now is the bends on the eastern end of Greens Road on the climb out from Greens Creek. And the question has been put, a reasonable question, of whether it's possible to improve the condition of that section of the road while the rectification works on these 2 slips are occurring. So we thought it worthwhile taking through or spending a little bit of time to talk through that option. Now, it is a project that we've previously identified, works on the bends to improve the surface and to provide some protection for off-road vehicles, essentially crash barriers. Such is the nature of the site and its confinement, that works would require, again, a full road closure to provide for sufficient room for plant to move about, material delivery and safe working conditions. Of course, that has significant implications for all of you, for all of the community out there. And with restoring or preserving access, you know, our #1 priority, the last thing that we want to do is to commence a project which will risk isolating anyone along that section of Greens Road, or any section of Greens Road for that matter. It is on our, as I said, on our list, and we've been investigating it. Funding options have been sought for the funding of this project. It's not insignificant, and we'll be, you know, we're hopeful that in the new year we'll be able to pin down that funding from either the state or the federal government and come back with some good news on that. of course, if we do secure that funding, it's not a project that we'd be able to undertake until we completed the restoration works at Site 1 and Site 2. We want to make sure that there's full and unfettered access through Greens Road to the west before we go and muck around with access there. Next slide, please, Chris.
Agree with me. Technology is just
Gremlins in the system.
yeah,
sorry.
it's one of those nights. Apologies, everyone.
So while Chris is looking for that, some of the other issues that have come up are the condition of the track along the Wheelbarrow Ridge access track or the trail. This trail runs through the national parks, and my understanding is that there's some significant endangered species on either side in sections, and so that's making it quite difficult to get in with any heavy plant to undertake maintenance in a short time frame. What we can do and what we have been doing is to get in and do some minor maintenance and pothole patching when we've been alerted to the condition of the track. Now, what we have done is to switch that over to more of a proactive approach where we now routinely inspect it, and that will certainly carry through when we're doing the restoration works, particularly on Site 2, to make sure that we're not waiting for it to deteriorate to the point where the community's at risk of complaining. We're in there looking at it regularly to make sure that it meets the level of service that it needs to meet. Keeping in mind, of course, that it is still a trail and it'll be handed back to national parks at the end of this. In terms of I guess higher degrees of maintenance, getting a grader in, national parks have been quite cooperative in that sense, but there are some approvals that we need to get through to do those more significant maintenance works. We've also heard pretty loud and clear that the timeliness of our alerts to the community about closures and openings hasn't met the mark, and we're investigating a texting service. There's some internal protocols that we just have to work through to ensure that when we launch the service, that it's going to meet the expectations of the community, and we're pretty confident that in the coming week or so we'll be able to roll that out. And I think that in combination with the higher rainfall threshold should see for a start far fewer closures, but secondly, when we do have to close the road, that we can alert you in a much more timely fashion of both the closure and the reopening. And similarly, we're working with PSM on protocols to ensure that we're re-inspecting the road as quickly as possible after a closure, and that we're not losing time to waiting for that. As Peter mentioned, consultation will be undertaken on the extended construction hours in the hope that will expedite the reinstatement of both sites. And the final thing that we're looking at with PSM is the opportunity to introduce, by exception, increased weight load limits. So if there's a particular need, then we can work through some protocols on how we can get vehicles over and above 5 tonne through either one of those sites. So that's what we're working on at the moment, ahead of the restoration works in February, March. Next slide. So in terms of the summary, we've completed this design for both sites as Gareth presented tonight. The REF is well underway, and the tender for the works will be launched or released to the market next week. The commencement of the permanent works at Site 2. So the project will commence around end of February, with plant on the ground a week or two after that. An estimated completion in June or July. With the completion of Site 2, assuming that the contractors don't come back with any fantastic, novel and innovative way of tackling Site 1 first, then we'll commence works at Site 1 in the middle of next year, with an estimated completion of November 2022. And I believe it's now over to Q&A.
Yep. I'll open up. Thank you, Will, Gareth, Peter and Chris. There was a fair bit in that, and I'm now happy to take any questions or comments, concerns, whatever they might be. So if you don't mind just popping up your little virtual hand. Rowan.
Hopefully you can hear me.
We've got you.
Okay. I've understood exactly what they're doing. I missed a little bit out because we've had a big storm go right through Greens Road. One of my main concerns is you guys are now going to take on board contractors' suggestions to change the sequencing of Site 1 and Site 2. Now that concerns quite a few of us because we're all been working around the sequencing of 2 first. And I know Steve from Juniors will be quite concerned with that because they've got a fairly substantial business that you guys are now going to play with if you're going to consider that. So as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure a lot of others are concerned, that's just not on. That's my main concern.
Yeah, and thanks, Rowan. And I might be able to address this, and I'll let the guys jump in if I'm incorrect. But I think at this stage we're pretty certain that we're going to proceed with Site 2 first. Where we would do Site 1 first was that if that overarching principle of maintaining access was maintained, and or so that's the first one, and that there was some sort of a significant time gain that would be obtained by doing Site 1 first. So being able to access Site 2 by doing Site 1 first, I think that's fair.
I hear what you're saying, but you're also saying in that second part of the answer was if you guys deem it to be quicker to do Site 2 by doing Site 1 first. So a lot of people with businesses and so forth are all going through here that are working on what plan to work with going forward. Now, we've all been very hampered with what's happened so far. And by changing the goalposts is, a huge difference to all of us. So as far as I'm concerned, that should not be on the table.
Okay, and I think we're happy to take that on board. And we were only ever going to tinker with the sequencing to benefit the community, Rowan. So if you're all saying just leave it alone and do it like it is, then I think we're pretty comfortable on that front.
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, if I know what I'm dealing with, at least I can deal with it. Yeah. If I've known, it's quite hard to deal with.
Gotcha. No worries
That's
at all.
My concern. I'll let everybody else have their say. Thank you.
Thanks, Rowan. Now, who have I got? Is that Rochelle or Craig there? Miller?
Rochelle, thanks.
Rochelle, hi, Rochelle.
Hi, guys. I think due to the requirements of national parks, we're all aware that essentially the track isn't to road standard. And I know that national parks requirements are the block there. But after speaking to Resilience New South Wales today, I think the locals deserve to be presented with some detailed information to why water access funding was denied. I'm pursuing these reports as Northern residents will be enduring the track travel until November because we're saying Site 1 will not be passable when it's under construction. After conversations with Resilience today, there was no information to why that support and funding for a water transport to ease the safety measures of, for instance, my kids getting to school, people getting to their vehicles to go to work, wouldn't meet the criteria as the predecessor of infrastructure, Jeff Organ, had outlined. So that's my first, inquiry into. Because I had an hour meeting with Resilience today, and I don't really understand how after support of a flood disaster, we can't get measurements in, like Rowan's living in a caravan. I don't understand why this doesn't meet the criteria of funding. So if that could be researched and explained and presented to us all, that would be fantastic. And Site 1 passable, I don't know whether the tenders are coming back with that. But, that would ease a lot of the problems too with the track issues, not meeting with national parks. And it's great. I am very appreciative that, you know, there has been improvements in visiting the sites after each closure, and I have noticed that. I haven't noticed the track as much, but if site 1 was passable, I think that would solve a few issues too with the track safety, because we're still getting head-ons. And Del Rio has got a huge festival of over 2,000 people in February. I mean, there's concerns travelling that track. Yeah, so that's the two inquiries I want to make. If there's any answers on that, or if we can look into it.
I might throw Chris Ammett under the bus there to find out if he can recall resilience advice as to why that they the water access wasn't considered fundable.
Why it didn't meet criteria, because the conversations I had with Resilience New South Wales today, they didn't express that, you know, they are actually surveying and looking into how they improve response during and after an event. And part of the recovery process with Resilience New South Wales is the recovery. So how does transport for a remote location where people, you know, they've all got their own challenges, how does that not meet criteria? And I think we all deserve some answers on that.
I think I probably have to take that one on notice, Liz. I wasn't actually involved in that, but I know there was a fair bit of work done in relation to looking at the water taxi and some of those options. And it was also looking about the safety of where we could actually have those landing points. So there was also those logistics of having some form of pier or some sort of structure that was there safe for people to get on and off that particular water facility. I think I see Richard there. Richard may be able to add to that.
Yeah, look, thank you, Chris. There has been discussion, no doubt you know, of Darren Osmotherly across the river at Lower Portland. He's in a position to provide the service. I'm meeting up with Transport for New South Wales, hopefully before Christmas. I can raise this with them and see if we can have that included as an eligible claim. In relation to Rowan's comments about Site 2, I fully appreciate, Rowan, your comment. The fact is that if we were to do Site 1 first and we had an event of excess of 20 millimetres at Site 2, we would effectively close off the area. So I fully appreciate the need to consider your continuous access. And as Elizabeth pointed out, more than likely we will proceed with Site 2 because the risk of isolating the community is not an option. We don't want to do that, and that would be an unfortunate event, and we want to avoid that at all costs. Thank you.
I think we'll take to come back to Rochelle on that natural disaster funding, because I'm sure they wrote to us and told us that they
and just thank you, and sorry to cut you off there. Just on that information too, Darren provided that quoting within 3 months without any response. But Resilience New South Wales have a boat available to provide for that service. They also make the docking in Riverstone and provide it. They have docks, pontoons that they provide for launch. So it is there and is available, and council, you know, they can get that from Resilience New South Wales. They don't have to organise external or find points. They just have to get them off Resilience New South Wales and put them in. You know, I've had those conversations, so I know it's there. I don't know why it hasn't been investigated further, but maybe it has and it hasn't been reported to us.
Yeah, happy to take that one offline, Rochelle, and get the information on that one.
Thank you.
There was a second part of that question about Site 1 being passable. Richard, did we adequately answer that question? Perhaps we did.
Yeah, while it's under construction, whether it was going to be passable.
My concern, what I raised before was, Elizabeth, and you correctly pointed out that if we were to do Site 1 first, the reality is that Site 2 is vulnerable to trigger closures at any time, and looking out the window, the storms are brewing. So if it exceeded 20 millimetres over a 24-hour period, we'd be forced to close Site 2. And if Site 1 was closed due to construction, we can't afford to isolate that community.
Yeah, no, understood. Chris?
I think just on Rochelle's point, so from the last slide, what I indicated was, while Site 1 works is being undertaken, it has to be closed off fully because of the upslope works. As Gareth indicated, we've got to cut into that upslope bank. So during that work, if I understand your question correctly, Rochelle, is Site 1 has to be closed when we're actually doing the permanent works at Site 1, and the only access will be through Site 2.
Thank you. I missed the PSM report because the storm went through and I couldn't log on.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you. I missed that part of the information. And I was wondering, because if they did Site 2 first and Site 1 was still passable while it was being constructed, which is obviously not going to happen, but that was why I had the question, is so that juniors could still have guests coming in, not through a fire trail. And the other B&Bs in the area with the same issues, the tourism of the area, especially in the summer months. And that's why I was presenting that question, but it's been answered, they're not passable. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Rochelle. There's another gentleman there. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Galaxy A20.
Hello, can you hear me?
We've got you. Yep.
Oh, right. Okay.
The camera's swung around the other way, but that's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just having trouble. I've had to do this on the phone rather than the laptop because it's taken out my internet, the storm. But yeah, like I think Richard mentioned, it'd just be absolute madness to start works on Site 1 without Site 2 being completely and permanently repaired. But the other question is, having lived here for 6 years and been on both sides of the river, I don't understand, or has there been any thought, are there any plans, is there any money available after all these works to actually seal Greens Road from the Colo River Bridge through to Greens Creek? The private developer who developed these lots down here put in a few hundred meters of sealed road up the steep hills, and it's had virtually no maintenance required. And yet, had this road been sealed, Greens Road here been sealed years ago, the break-even point would have been that by now you wouldn't have to send graders in and earthworks every 3 months, because within a fortnight of any grading being done, there's ruts and potholes. I mean, Hillshire Council have had the river road sealed for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And yet our side has surprisingly a large amount of traffic coming through from the Hunter Valley via St Albans, as well as from Wiseman's Ferry. There's significant traffic coming through there. And why, or is there not any money there after all these works to actually seal this 6 kilometre section of road? Because sealing it would then make it virtually maintenance free forever and a day, and also prevent any water going into other areas of the road to cause any further subsidence and any further damage to roads. So if someone can answer that question.
Yeah, there's certainly money. We'd spoken about this previously about there being money in our long-term financial plan for sealings of some of it. I don't know if Chris or Richard, if you can recall the extent of that sealing.
Yeah, look, I might just give an overview. Council have adopted a sealing of certain gravel roads based on priorities, and the priorities were based on clinical factors such as traffic volumes, which you referred to, population density, ease of construction, and whether or not it was a through road for haulage, bus routes, and so forth. And based on that, during the in 2017, Council embarked on a limited sealing program, and a portion of Greens Road was identified for sealing up to that particular guest house. Beyond that point is something that would be part of a future consideration. And what you identified as the Nadu stud area, that's around about a 3 metre wide pavement. It's not adjacent to the river. It's fairly well inland as opposed to some of the other portions of Greens Road, and they come with the concerns about potential slip into the river. I've been here for some time, and a blacktop, a seal, doesn't prevent a slump into the river. You only need to look at Settlers Road and St Albans Road. They are prone to slip into the river. So a sealing of a road doesn't prevent that underlying cause. And fortunately, in this case, we are trying to address that problem. But it's something we can consider in the future. I can't guarantee it, but I hear what you're saying. We do have 300 kilometres, and our resources really don't allow us to seal the whole 300 kilometres, and we have to prioritise. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add.
Yeah, sorry, go.
Yeah, yeah. Since being here, I've seen the Hawkesbury budgets year after year, and they seem to and there's also Hawkesbury Council, from my conversations with state government, are supposed to comply and fix roads within the flood plan here for this area, and I've noticed time and time again that all the sealing and repairs seem to be just to already sealed roads further up around Windsor and Pitt Town and all those areas, and people who already enjoy having sealed roads, to put up with a few potholes, I think is quite minor compared to the traffic volume. And not only tradespeople, I've seen a full-length coach trying to come through here and go through to Webb's Creek. I've seen minibuses, and there's lots and lots of tradespeople that actually take this route through here between Wiseman's Ferry and coming back around to Wilberforce here. And these plans, budgets for roadworks have never included the roads that are quite affected with this amount of traffic and the amount of damage that occurs, and that's down here in Greens Road. They always seem to be resealing already sealed roads, which I think is a bit unfair and a bit over the top.
Look, you're correct in your perception because people judge it from where they live. But if you look at the broader picture, we have recently sealed Ollie's Carrigeong Road, Reedy Road. We have plans to seal Douglas Street, Packer Road, which is a high traffic volume road. So look, I agree with your comment that in your local area, you haven't seen any sealing. But when you look at the bigger picture of the Hawkesbury City Council, I can identify a lot of localities where we have been proactively sealing gravel roads and trying to improve the condition of a road network.
Yeah, well, the Packer Road is a nice wide road and doesn't get anywhere near affected as what Greens Road does because of the volume of traffic and the amount of erosion and ruts and potholes.
Look,
it's only a short road, and I've driven it many times, and it's nice and wide. It's easy to pass, but Greens Road is much narrower.
Packer Road carries a lot more traffic. I certainly don't want to go into a debate as to the priorities.
Perhaps we just leave it there, Richard. So perhaps we just park that. I'd have no intention of entering into a debate about the prioritisation of our road sealing program, because we could be at it all night. I think what we will do though is clarify the extent to which we do have plans for the sealing of the partial sealing of Greens Road, because I think that's a bit more of a firmer and known quantity. So happy to certainly loop back to the group on the timing and the extent of any works that may be in the budget there. The next hand I've got is Alison Wheeler.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Council for just for the fact that they've really paid attention to Greens Road, and the fact that it's been a really long process is incredibly painful for everyone on this call, but I think Council is paying attention, and for that we're very grateful. I just have a couple of questions. One is dual carriageway. Every picture I see, it's single. The road is single carriageway, and yet we were promised dual. I'm assuming that's in the tender. That's just a yes or no, really. Is that right?
Yes, it is. The seal width is in the order of 6.5 metres through the slip areas that we're rectifying.
That's one lane each way.
Yeah, one
I know
lane
that
each way.
saying that, right? But as long as it is dual carriageway, because it's certainly not at the moment, right? So I think that's the first thing. Yes, so one lane each way, which is better than a single lane, which is causing problems. The monitoring every day that you're doing, we had a scenario and I was sort of half expecting someone to raise that. The poor woman was advised by the crew working on Wheelbarrow Ridge Road that that Greens Road Site 2 was open. She came down there, it wasn't. She tried to effect a turnaround on her driveway, got caught, got towed out, etc. She's very upset. You know, it's not an isolated case, and I just really would like you guys to, in your communication, if it's SMS, I'm pretty sure not everybody receives SMS, but you should also be communicating with the people that are working on your roads, because they are by de facto traffic controlling as well in an attempt to be helpful. I also just wanted to add that I'm really grateful that you're not also responsible for the communications network out there, because, you know, we've just heard everybody on this call with a storm involved. The communications are pretty poor, and when your roads are down, then you need your communications to be up. And I've heard nobody talk to that at all. I know it's not directly involving you, but it is part of the communication of the community. I think the other things that I was curious about was when we talk about the wishes of the community, we speak about it in terms of, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a working road? I just cannot think that council can be sort of treating it in an offhand way. And a 2-year project from the time it occurred to delivery of the final closing of or opening of the road seems to be an incredibly long time. And I'm sure if, you know, Mike Baird or any one of these politicians was living out our way, or former politicians was living out our way, you know, this would be moving a little faster. So I think a sense of urgency feels like it's missing. And maybe it's not, but that's how it feels to me on the outside. And I just also wanted to add, I think the point that was made just before by the former speaker was not asking you or trying to have you reset priorities in terms of sealing roads. But since you're sending out a tender to people that work on roads, he's really asking, can you not add sealing into it and have them actually put an estimate in as part of that tender when you've got some fiscal leverage on money being spent in that immediate area, and you'll have the right equipment there, or most of it, to be able to consider that. So that's the question I think he was asking, and I don't believe you answered it. And with that, I'd like to say to everybody on the call, you know, this is probably the last call with council before Christmas. I'd like to wish you all a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate that. With respect to that last piece, Chris, it's really in respect of the natural disaster funding that we're talking about, aren't we? Really, about how far the potential ceiling can go beyond the scope of the project itself.
Yeah, that's correct. So these funds are based on rectifying these 2 areas of concern that we've got with site 1 and 2. And that's the limitations we have, is to bring it back to really, I guess, to what it was before the flood hit. But we are looking at, I guess, to answer Alison's question, looking at sealing those 2 sections as well. In essence, it's probably going to be slightly wider than what it was before. So we will allow for 2-way traffic, as Garrett indicated in one of his charts before. So we are sort of limited in that sense. And that's what we're really here to achieve, is to get those 2 sites completed as soon as we can. And we do understand the timeline it has taken, but it has been a very complex engineering project.
Yeah. And if it gives you, probably does not mean anything to the community, but this is sort of, we're talking a $14 or $15 million project here. This is actually a significant piece of civil engineering work that we're undertaking here. And I guess, as Chris pointed out, the complexity of the work that Gareth and the team at PSM have been working on in order to come up with a design that effectively builds in an appropriate degree of resilience from future natural disaster is incredibly complex. So totally understand and appreciate and certainly empathise with each and every one of you who have been displaced from, you know, your average, you know, daily trips and the like, and the toll that this has taken on you emotionally and financially, physically in some cases. So appreciate the circumstances that you're all in. Do I have any other questions or comments? Have I not addressed anything? The issue of comms, I think, Kim, you popped a little comment in there about the NBN and phone outages. Absolutely. So Susan's office and council have both continued to advocate on the issue of telecommunications in the Hawkesbury. Very, very topical issue, particularly around times of fire and flood, and that we'll continue to advocacy on that. And Kim's put her hand up to help there as well. Do I have anything further? Otherwise, I think we'll continue to, feel free to sing out if I've missed something, but otherwise we'll continue to communicate with you. I expect the next thing we might be doing is asking, is Suzanne Stewart here, is to start to try to garner some mobile telephone numbers, I think through our Your Say page, Suzanne, so that we can set up those SMS alerts.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're just trying to work out some of the logistics, as Will pointed out, because the telcos are actually limited out there. That we want our site, we want to get this happening quickly, but our staff out on site don't necessarily have reception, so that's proving a bit of a challenge. But Suzanne.
Yeah, that's correct. We put some information in our latest update, so if you want to jump on there, it's got all the details. You can go on and register.
And we'll get that up and running as soon as we can, and so that it'll assist us in communicating to you as soon as possible on openings and closures. Is there anything further?
It's Ron. Can I add something?
Yeah.
Can you ask council with their trimming of trees to come down? We can't get two cars past one another between the Leagues Club and past the next three bins. So we've had pretty much 3 near collisions there in the last 3 weeks. And we had a tree down, which I went down to cut up because the council couldn't come out until later. So I'd appreciate if you could send someone out to clean that up.
No problem at all, Ron.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that might be it for us this evening. We'll keep in contact with you. There's a couple of, I've making a note around advice from Resilience on the natural disaster funding, around the extent of the ceiling and what's in the budget or on the ceiling of Greens Road. And then we've got that action just then from Rowan about some of the branch trimming. And Suzanne's going to garner as many mobile phone numbers from you as we can so that we can get our SMS alert system up and running. So if that's it, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time, your patience. I know this is an incredibly challenging situation for you all to be in. But please bear with us. I think we're starting to firm this up, and all things being equal, we'll be out there getting cracking in February. So we'll keep in touch with you. In the meantime, have a Merry Christmas and let us know if you have anything in the meantime. Thank you.